What you are listening to right now is Otherside by Raine, a song that was added to Minecraft in the latest update 1.18 in the form of a music disc. I feel like this song perfectly encapsulates what 1.18 is all about and what it feels like to play. That is to say, there's a sense of wonder and excitement to it. It's fresh and new and just an absolute joy. 1.18 updates the terrain generation of Minecraft with brand new caves and vast landscapes just waiting to be explored. What Mojang has achieved here, I think, is nothing short of incredible. This update completely changes the game, and there are only a few updates in Minecraft's history that have ever really been able to do that. And right here, we've started a new chapter. For this update, I have seen nearly universal praise among the Minecraft community. If you're looking for a video that's just an overview of every small detail in the changelog, then this video isn't that. I'm not going to be going over every single thing added or changed about the game. Instead, I'm going to be looking at the bigger picture. What are the big changes? How does it feel to play the game now? What does this mean for the game? And what can we expect from it in the future? Now, I should mention, 1.18 is actually the second part of the Caves and Cliffs update, with the first part releasing earlier this year in July with 1.17. For this video, I'm going to be reviewing both 1.18 and 1.17 together, as that's what the update was originally intended to be before the world generation aspect of the update was delayed. So, without further ado, let's quickly go through the major additions and changes to the game, most of which were added in 1.17. Let's start with copper. Copper is a new ore added into the game that lets you create copper blocks, which have this nifty feature where it will actually oxidize over time and turn green, just like it does in real life. You can also make an item with the copper ingots known as the lightning rod, which attracts lightning to it to stop your houses from burning down in thunderstorms. Next, we have amethyst geodes. Geodes will spawn randomly underground, and they truly feel magical to come across. Amethyst crystals will grow in these geodes, which you can collect and use for new items such as the spyglass or tinted glass, which doesn't allow light to pass through it. We also have candles, a nice decorative item made from wax and a string. You can dye them multiple colors and they look quite nice. You can even make a birthday cake. New blocks such as deep slate, along with all of its variants, finally give us a dark gray stone texture. We also get other new blocks like tuff, calcite, moss, and lots more. The glow squid from the mob vote was added into the game. I know people love to hate this guy, but I think they're pretty neat. They drop glow ink sacs which can be used to make signs or item frames glow. Goats are also a new mob that you can find in the mountains. They jump around and they will ram you if you hang around them long enough. You can also milk them for that sweet, sweet yolk milk. All the textures for the ores have changed, with diamonds keeping their original shape. The reason for this change was to assist colorblind people by introducing different shapes as a distinguishing factor. I'm all for accessibility changes like this, plus the textures look nice, so I think it's a good change. Another change to ores, a pretty big one at that as well, is that iron and gold no longer drop ore blocks when mined. Instead, they drop raw ore. This change is intended to offset the inventory space taken up by iron and gold now having deep slate variants. An even more important tweak is that iron and gold are now affected by the fortune enchantment, which I think is a good change to make the game just a little less grindy when working on large projects which require a lot of these materials. And the last major change is that mobs will now only spawn in light level 0 rather than 7 or below like it used to be. This is to make it easier to light up the big caves, but it also allows players more flexibility with lighting in their builds. Let's talk about the first thing you will notice the moment you boot up the game, and easily the most important part of this update, the brand new world generation. This is easily the best the terrain generation has ever looked. Each world feels far more unique and has their own identity, as opposed to the previous generation where everything looked quite samey from world to world. A forest biome would look just about the same as any other forest biome, a desert would look the same as every other desert, but now even different areas within the same biome can feel wildly distinct. What this achieves is a world that is fun to explore just for the sake of exploring. Finding beautiful natural landscapes feels like a reward in and of itself. And that's not even to mention the caves. But we'll talk about those later. For now, let's just talk about what exactly they have changed about the world generation. First, they've expanded the world height by adding 64 blocks to the surface, making the maximum world height 320, and adding 64 blocks below what previously used to be bedrock, which creates a total of 128 blocks added to the total world height. This allows for much taller mountains and much deeper caves, and Mojang absolutely uses this new world height to its utmost potential. These caves would not be able to exist with the constrained space of 64 blocks they had to work with previously, and likewise with the new mountains, generating up to a maximum of 260 blocks. The extra 60 blocks of space is reserved for players who wish to build large mountaintop structures. Second, they've made it so that terrain shape is now separate from biome generation. What this means is that instead of biomes controlling the terrain, like for instance whether it has hills or if it's flat, biomes now adapt to whatever terrain is already generated. This creates much more uniqueness in biomes and allows biomes to transition to one another much more fluidly. And finally, let's talk about the caves. This is the first time they've updated how caves generate since 1.8, Beta 1.8, when they added ravines into the game. That was over a decade ago. This update was honestly just sorely needed for a very long time, and now that it's here, mining, the part where literally half the title of the game is named after, it's actually fun. But how exactly do these new caves generate? Well, basically, the new caves come in 3 different types that the developers call noodle, cheese, and spaghetti caves. The cheese caves are the larger caves with the stone pillars going down the middle. The noodle caves are long and windy, definitely similar to the old caves. The spaghetti caves are cramped and claustrophobic, and all these come together to create a cave system that is extremely fun to explore. And don't worry if you're worried about the old cave generation going away, the old caves are still there, they're just more rare now and have been tweaked slightly to better connect to the new caves. Okay, this all sounds great, but how is this going to work when updating my current world to the new terrain generation, I hear you say. Well, Mojang has put a lot of work into making sure that your current world adapts well when exploring new chunks with a feature called biome blending. What this does is seamlessly blends old chunks in your world with the new 1.18 chunks, and the results are quite incredible. Gone are the ugly chunk borders of the past you used to get when updating worlds from one update to another. On the surface, anyways, underground can be a different story. You'll often get these flat walls and caves that end at the chunk border. And look at this, an Amethyst geode tried to generate right at the border and was cut off, but it's not really too noticeable. Mojang has also paid attention to people who have cleared out bedrock, and those areas will just generate air below them so you can retain your bottomless pits of death. It's not always perfect though. While recording footage to show off this feature, an Amethyst geode spawned in the middle of the pit. Not a big deal since you can just remove it, but still something I should mention. Okay, so this is all well and good, but how does it actually feel to play? Well, I created a new world when the first pre-release dropped to find out exactly how it differs, not only how it made me want to play, but also how the game feels to play now. And it definitely feels different. The tone of the game seems to have shifted. I think the best way to describe it, at least for me, is that it brings me back to when I first played Minecraft 10 years ago. The game had this charming, magical feel to it. The world felt expansive and uncharted, and there's this subtle feeling of loneliness that's hard to describe that I felt like early Minecraft was really able to nail. Or maybe that's just the nostalgia talking, I don't know. But what I do know is that those feelings are back. When I'm exploring the large caves, I get this feeling that I'm small and alone in this big world. When I'm adventuring across the surface, I feel like I'm traveling a vast unknown. These are exactly the feelings I crave and what I feel Minecraft has been missing for a very long time. When you're out exploring, there's almost never a shortage of landmarks that you can see on the horizon that you might want to check out. It keeps exploration engaging and fun, and I'm constantly thinking about building crazy structures in these areas. The spyglass is also a great tool to further scope out places you want to go, and it's fun to use. The noise it makes when you zoom in is really satisfying. There will also be no shortage of cave entrances around the world, and a lot of the cave entrances are just absolutely stunning. It's not perfect, and there are minor gripes that I have. For instance, I think structures, especially villages, generate way too often. I mean, look at this. There are 2 different villages and a pillager outpost in this single clip, so close together. Plus, there's another village just a tiny bit further out beyond the desert one. Stuff like this can ruin that feeling of loneliness, of being an adventurer in an uncharted world. I think Mojang should decrease the spawn rate of villages significantly. It shouldn't be so rare that they're a pain to find, but rare enough to where it feels special to come across one. Having this new kind of terrain though really made me want to spread out my builds more. I don't know why, but it felt like having the builds spread out really just matched the feeling of vastness the world gave me. So I had my mine in one area, my house in another area, which I never finished, and a farm area a bit further away. What I found though is that playing this way doesn't really work too well when you're trying to grow crops and animals the old-fashioned way. The chunks aren't loaded in that area, so the crops don't grow. I was hoping the new simulation distance slider would fix this issue, so I cranked it all the way up, but unfortunately, at least as of right now, the slider doesn't calculate growth of crops. But ultimately, it's not really that big of a deal. Just make sure to build your farms closer to where your base of operations is. So what about exploring the caves? This is easily the best part of the update for me, and it is so much fun. And all this variance in cave structure provides an interesting experience that makes this new mining fun and exciting, rather than the honestly pretty dull mining we had before. Caves are also much more likely to intersect now without turning into dead ends, creating seemingly endless cave systems, and with each cave having a unique look to them, it's much harder to get lost in them, although it can definitely still happen if you're not careful. You should always check out every single nook and cranny in these caves too, because oftentimes they'll lead somewhere you don't expect. Caves can have local aquifers now, which allow for underground lakes of water and lava, and can create beautiful scenery or lead as an entrance into an underwater cave. And now, with having 64 blocks of extra space to work with, these new caves go really deep. Below Y0, instead of finding stone everywhere, you will now find deep slate. The deep slate layer has a distinctly different vibe to it. With the darker colors, you really get the sense that you're deep underground. The deep slate also has a different noise to it when you mine it and walk on it, which further distinguishes the deep slate and stone layers. Overall, I think they really nailed the feeling of adventuring deep into a world's unknown caverns, never knowing what you'll uncover. But the variety doesn't stop there. Mojang has also added 2 new cave biomes, the Lush Caves and the Tripstone Caves. And I have to say, the Lush Caves are just absolutely beautiful. The vines growing from the ceiling lighting up the area, the terraced water pools on the ground, and the green moss covering the ceiling and floors really make this a calm and pleasant place to be. And if that wasn't good enough, these caves are also where you can find axolotls, and they're pretty darn cute. It also tends to be much safer with all the light removing areas from upspawning. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have the Tripstone Caves. It feels cold and dangerous here, and you constantly have to watch your step because falling onto the Tripstone causes you to take a lot of damage. Of course, this biome is still beautiful and is a pleasure to come across. As a bonus, you'll also find extra copper here, so if you're in need of some of that, this is the place to go. This one doesn't really count as a biome, but there's also flooded caves which you can explore if you want. These caves do have magma blocks in them, so you can get air while you swim around looking for ores or other cave entrances. Or you can just use a good old door trick or water breathing potions if you have access to those. Diamonds will actually spawn more frequently in these underwater caves due to the fact that diamonds spawn less often when exposed to air, which is definitely a good incentive to explore these flooded caves. Alright, let's roll it back a little bit. You know how I said that these caves can get massive? Well, I meant it. A lot of these new caves are huge and will fill you with awe upon coming across them. But with this increase in size comes an increase in difficulty. Mobs spawn everywhere in these wide open caves, and it will really test your mastery of Minecraft's combat system if you want to explore them. This is fantastic because Minecraft can become kinda easy, so to have a challenge like this is very welcome. For others, exploring these large caves will be something you have to tackle a little bit at a time. With careful planning and strategizing, however, you should be able to light up these large caves and gather all the resources they have to offer. And gathering these resources can be pretty tricky sometimes, since they can be high up in the walls or the ceiling. That's why I recommend preparing a little and just bringing some ladders or scaffolding down with you on your mining trips to make harvesting these ores just a little bit easier. Speaking of preparing, coal doesn't spawn in the deep slate layer, so you'll have to make sure you have plenty of torches with you when you go venturing into the deep slate caves. I'll also say with the increased verticality of these caves, traversal of them, especially in the early game, is much more difficult, and it would be nice if Mojang added an item similar to how ropes work in Terraria to be able to more easily get around. All this added preparation to exploring these caves as well as the size of them made me want to create a sort of stopgap cave base to help me get ready to delve deep into them. There's so much space here, and just like the overworld, this underground terrain is very inspiring for all sorts of builds. You can even set up multiple different cave bases the further you go, and connect them up all by rail if you're really dedicated. Mojang has also made a few changes to ore spawning. First of all, different ores spawn at a higher frequency at different Y levels. This chart here shows where you're more likely to find what ores. This can give you direction while mining if you're trying to achieve a goal. Say you're specifically looking for a lot of gold. Well, just find some caves around that Y level and start looking. Or strip mine, if you hate fun. Ores also spawn in smaller blobs now, but you'll see them a lot more frequently in these larger caves, so it balances out. Here's a clip where I found 3 diamond veins all pretty close to one another. That being said though, it can actually be surprisingly easy to miss diamonds when exploring larger caves, so make sure that you're observant of the area around you, and you'll often be rewarded. If you're really lucky, you might also come across large copper or large iron veins. These veins spawn copper or iron in massive amounts, and I mean massive. I came across a copper vein in my world, and I was able to get nearly 23 stacks of raw copper with Fortune 3 from one of these veins, and this was a pretty small one. But they can be hard to spot sometimes, which again rewards observant players. You know you'll have found one when you see a lot of iron mixed with tuff or copper mixed with granite in the walls of a cave. I think these veins are great for players who don't want to spend the time and effort in making an iron or copper farm, but still want large amounts of ore for whatever project they're working on. And I think the best part of all of this is that I don't have to strip mine at all anymore to get the resources I need. That's still certainly a possibility if you want to do that, but I will gladly leave the days of endlessly strip mining behind. Except for ancient debris. Yeah, that still sucks to get. I know they just updated the nether, but some awesome nether caves would make searching for ancient debris just way more fun. Now, while this update is amazing, it doesn't contain everything that was originally promised in the Minecraft Live presentation in 2020. The Deep Dark, a cave biome inhabited by a powerful creature known as the Warden, was delayed to 1.19. It was quite disappointing to hear this news, but with what was shown off in the 2021 presentation, which was very exciting, I'm definitely willing to wait as long as is needed for Mojang to perfect it. I don't want them to release just some half-assed attempt at something just to try and meet a schedule. But if the Deep Dark was something you were really looking forward to, it might be worth holding off on creating a new world until 1.19 comes out. The Deep Dark was definitely the biggest delay, but also shown off in the 2020 presentation was archaeology and bundles. Bundles were an early game item that was supposed to solve minor clutter in the inventory by allowing the player to combine random loose items, like maybe seeds or flowers, into one stack, clearing up space. They had bundles in the 1.17 snapshot for a while, but players weren't entirely happy with how they worked and wanted something that solved the bigger inventory issue at hand. So Mojang went back to the drawing board. You can still get the bundles though with the /give command if you want to play around with them. As for archaeology, they showed a little bit of it off, but it was definitely pretty clear that it was fairly early on in development as a feature. I think the idea has potential, and I'm excited to see where they take it, but we'll have to wait a bit longer to see any more of it. And wait a bit longer we will, because apparently we won't be seeing bundles or archaeology in the upcoming Wild update next year. There is no clear indication of when we'll be seeing any of these features, but it has been noted that none of them have been cancelled, at least for the time being. Overall, I don't think that the delay of any of these features, except for maybe the Deep Dark, really impacts my enjoyment of the whole Caves and Cliffs update. I'm definitely very happy with what we got, and like I said, I don't want Mojang to half-ass the Deep Dark. 1.18 still stands very strong on its own, and none of the delayed features were 100% necessary for this update. All of this comes together to create an experience that is immersive, constantly rewarding, and most importantly, fun. 1.17 felt very empty and incomplete, and that's because it was. Finally, with the second half of the Caves and Cliffs update, we are getting the mostly full experience that was promised during the Minecraft Live presentation in 2020. I personally think that the 5-month delay for the terrain generation features was worth the wait. For me, that magic of Minecraft is back. Whether you're looking to get back into Minecraft after a long time away from it, or maybe even wondering if you want to buy the game, I definitely think that with this update, Minecraft brings something fresh and exciting to the table. So, was it worth splitting the update into two? Do you think that they should have waited to release 1.18 for the Deep Dark? Or do you think my opinion is garbage? I'd love to hear what you're thinking down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, a like would be much appreciated, and if you like this kind of content and want to see more video essays about games in general, go ahead and click the subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching the video, and goodbye.